Have you ever had the experience where you know you should do something, like get to work on time, or put the laundry away, or finish a creative project, or just brush your teeth before bed, but you just couldn't do it? Everybody procrastinates sometimes, but for people who experienced abuse and neglect in childhood, procrastinating can take over your life. It can hold you back. It can make you depressed, that you're stuck day after day in the same old rut. It's kind of like a paralysis. So what is that? This is something that used to happen to me all the time. It was so demoralizing. And then I made it stop. And I wouldn't be here doing this YouTube channel and the courses and the live shows I do and the team of 7 people I have on my team. I would never have been able to grow this unless I had cracked, how to keep my productivity going strong. But when people ask me how I did it, most of them don't like the answer they get. So if you want to hear how I did it, I will tell you. Okay. So first, I had to develop a new understanding of what procrastination is, because the word is a bit of a euphemism. It's not just like, oh, I'm being lazy, haha. It ruins your life, actually, like a parasite that infects your will, and it sabotages your self-concept as someone whose life is important and deserves time and work. So I use the word paralysis because you find yourself unable to take positive action on your own behalf. And this can be in little day-to-day things like you browse the internet when you have to work, or in bigger things that affect more people in a profound way, like not getting around to mailing the utility bill and leaving the whole family without electricity. So that used to happen in the home where I grew up. Now you can procrastinate to the degree that you ruin your relationship, your career, your integrity, your finances, and your health. So that's not just being lazy, that's a kind of soul sickness. So why can't we act? Honestly, I think the biggest reason is that doing things, committing ourselves, spending energy, creating something out of nothing, the reason we put it off is because it's hard. And the difficulty of truly accomplishing something combines with a kind of exhaustion that goes along with trauma symptoms, depression, conflicts, emotional outbursts, a feeling of overwhelm. There's a feeling that life is already too hard and you can't take on anything more than what you have right in front of you so that you can survive. And it's not like there's nothing to that, but it's not a mindset that helps you solve the trauma problem. For example, one of the great joys of my life is publishing videos on YouTube, and I'm doing that work right this second as I record this. I love publishing videos and then reading all the comments and discussions that people like you contribute. Making these videos is a joy. It's also how my family earns an income. But you know what? The days when I'm supposed to be planning and researching and scripting those videos, it's like torture. And I'm craving to just go lie down and not do the work. Because the whole process, it takes days of preparation, probably about 6 to 8 hours of focused creative work goes into every video I make. And it's a little less when I share older videos or read a letter, though reading all the letters I get and choosing a few that I'll answer in videos each week, that takes hours too. And hearing about so many people suffering can take a toll on my emotions too. But the hardest part is just getting started. When it's time to really lay out what the videos for the week are going to be about and actually make them, I suddenly just get, so interested in my plants and getting that crud out of the little aluminum track at the bottom of sliding windows. That's what I was doing yesterday. And oh, look, people what are they saying on Twitter? And it makes no sense because window crud and Twitter make me feel bad about myself. And releasing these videos makes me feel good. But doing the work that leads up to that moment of taping is hard. I just had to get straight with myself. It makes me happy to set my intention and stick to my intention. This is what integrity is. It's accomplishment. It's the way I fulfill my personal mission to help other people who have childhood PTSD to recover. And I'm proud of my work. I also see flaws in my work, but being engaged in trying, just creating, sharing, serving people in the world, it is what keeps me going and makes my life good. Procrastinating is an attempt to solve the problem of stress. And stress is a problem. And it can seem like if I could just procrastinate a little while, I'll get all this energy and focus, as if, procrastinating is like a battery charging or like a defibrillator. The things that they do this and they put it on somebody's chest if their heart stops and they go charged and then you leap into action. Except that's not how it works. There's a time to rest and care for yourself, but blowing off the work you know you need to do is not the same thing. It doesn't de-stress you. It causes stress. For people with childhood PTSD, especially when there's a lot of unhealed stuff, you're in a state of stress pretty much all the time, so everything is hard. And that's the vicious circle. Stress makes things hard, so you avoid tasks, which makes you more stress, which prompts you to avoid tasks even more, and so on. People who don't have childhood PTSD have no idea how much work it is for some of us to do ordinary things. It's exhausting, it's stressful, just being in the world sometimes, right? People are hard. Going out of the house is hard. Sticking to a schedule is hard. Expressing yourself is hard. Hearing other people's opinions when you disagree with them is hard. Making money is hard. But you know what's harder? Not doing all these things. And that's why when you feel overwhelmed and stressed, the solution isn't always to give yourself permission to procrastinate. Sometimes the best way to calm stress is to take the chaos of your unfinished tasks from the heap of to-do items and forgotten emails and unfinished projects and just get to work on them. So you might want to stop thinking about stress and overwhelm and stop telling yourself that the solution is to avoid everything that's stressful for you. Because in the end, the path of least resistance is to do these things anyway. And that's the thing that most people do not want to hear. But that's how life gets easier, when we make order out of chaos. It feels good. It feels inspiring. It makes you happier. So how do you get started? Maybe you know the feeling of just getting the urge, running out there with the intention to do it all, right? This is such a childhood PTSD thing, to go from, I can't do anything, to I have to do everything. And there are times when that makes sense, but there's a time when it's just wishful thinking that you'll be able to tackle your entire list in a single day. Now, I don't want to discourage all that positive problem solving, but what can happen is you make a list of 20 things, you start on the first 3 all at the same time, and then you get overwhelmed and you fall back into procrastination. So taking action at a healthy pace is like a muscle. You can start to work it out slowly, just a little at a time at first, and that's a good way to get strong. So whether you do a little at a time or go on a cleaning binge, I'll tell you what the solution is not. The solution is not to give up on yourself. Don't identify with the trauma and mistake paralysis and giving up for self-care. Don't go to Instagram and read all the posts from people who speak tenderly about how broken they are. They can do that if they want to, but you are focusing on your strengths and your vision and your commitment to not let yourself down. When you let yourself down, your worst behaviors will start to appear. And when you fall short of your own goals, you know what your CPTSD wants to do? It wants to find someone to blame. In fact, if you start having random thoughts about how people are against you, or you're going over and over and over some harm done to you in the past, ask yourself, is there something I'm avoiding right now? Am I actually angry at myself for not following through on what I need to be doing? And by the way, if you're not sure if complex PTSD is driving some of your self-defeating actions, you can take a quiz I developed. It's right down in the description section near the top. There's a link to the free tools page of my website. You'll find all my quizzes there and my free course. So most people don't want to hear this, but the solution for procrastination lies in action. But that's action taken in right proportion to your capacity. Now, when you've been deep in procrastination and avoiding your life, don't wait until it feels right to get started. If you've been skipping brushing your teeth at night, just take that one step and do it, even when you're tired, just for practice, just to get a tiny experience of integrity around intention and follow through. And then the next day, do the laundry. If you're still feeling good, you can reply to emails that people wrote you weeks ago, but you never answered. You can schedule a haircut. You can pop into the gym that you pay for, but you never visit. You can review your credit card bill for all the monthly subscriptions you forgot were still draining your finances, for things you never use. So you could throw out the moldy takeout container and the yellow broccoli in your fridge, which is something I need to do today, and sweep the front steps, also something I need to do today. So you know the good actions you need to be taking next. You may have to push yourself, not like a maniac, but some every day. You know that saying you hear sometimes? It's like, don't be a human doing, be a human being. Well, it's a good sentiment, but doing and being are both really important. And doing is how we earn a living, and it's how we express ourselves. I mean, how are you going to become fully yourself if you don't do things? It's not just the thing you get done, it's the momentum you build. The more you take action, the easier it becomes, and the more natural it feels to keep taking action. I procrastinated for years on the idea for Crappy Childhood Fairy, and it was in my mind for 2 decades before I had the inner power to do it, and I'm so glad I did. The thing that launched me into action was I finally signed up for a seminar about how to share your own life story as a way to teach others. And I wanted to do it, but I was terrified to do it. You know, what if I got judged? What if my work was bad? What if I was successful and then committed to always working hard? That was the big fear, and you know what? My fear has come true. My work as the fairy can be hard. It's, you know, a full-time job plus a lot of work on nights and weekends sometimes. But finally in my life, I'm actually bringing to the world what I have to give. And I never really felt like that in all the previous incarnations of my work. I was getting paychecks, but I felt like my life was passing me by and I wasn't being me. This that I'm doing now, this is so who I am, and it feels great. So do you relate to this? The reason I encourage you to do the work and the learning to do what you're really meant to do and to go toward what you're capable of becoming is because I believe it's the only thing that really makes a person happy. It's what gives you that feeling that it was a worthwhile day and you can go to bed with peace and know that you spent your day well. And it doesn't have to be this giant accomplishment every day. I mean, that's not realistic. For me, the things that make me feel like I really live today are connecting with my family and friends in a loving way, a little each day, and being outside and walking every day, and then doing work that I know is genuinely making a difference in other people's lives. So I used to feel envious of people who build roads. I always thought, oh gosh, they get to go home at night and say to themselves, I helped build 100 feet of highway today. And then they know they did an honest day's work that helps people. Well, I didn't have that fully until I started doing what I do now. I didn't know how to start, but then I started. When I slapped down, it was $2,000 for that seminar. And that was just to get in the door for 4 days. And I had to stay at a hotel, kind of expensive, and eat in restaurants the whole time and get to the city where it was held. And I'd never spent so much money on this kind of thing in my life. And you know what? I got stomach flu on the afternoon of the 3rd day, and I missed that part of the day and the whole 4th day. But the point is, I got started. And that was the day that the feeling that life was passing me by ended. And I stopped feeling like I had wasted my time and my talents, and all the advantages I've had in life of like, I have food, I have a roof over my head, I'm reasonably healthy, I have an education, like all of that. I just knew it was meant for something more. So I felt like I owed it to the world to give it back and to give my best. And so I launched Crappy Childhood Fairy as a blog, and immediately, that failure feeling just went away. I started to feel good. And it was on the side. I had this other, I was doing other work at the time. I was doing this in the evenings, but it grew. And being the Crappy Childhood Fairy, it is a lot of work, and emotionally it's hard sometimes, and the work, can really pile up, but it's never as hard as my life used to be when I knew that I could create this channel, but I didn't make the effort. That is why it felt like life was passing me by, because it was. Every day, for me, for you, Time is ticking, and the world is just waiting for you to step up and take your true place in it. The world needs you. And you can do that by taking action. You can start with just one action. You can do it today. Small, consistent actions are the most effective. They're sustainable. You can keep adding to them. They have little spaces between each step when you can catch your breath and get your equilibrium again. And if you keep going, this series of small actions leads to massive change. But they give you a little breather between small actions. By keeping them small, you get to equilibrate between actions you take. Because if you have CPTSD, it can be a little rough sometimes. So you come back to center and then keep going. So if you have spent years of your life constrained from letting your light shine, your spirit is going to love this. You're getting somewhere. Accomplishment feels good. Now, when you finally act, does success always follow? No, not always. But what does follow is vibrance. You're alive and having the adventure of your life. And you may or may not reach the goal. You may not even want the goal in the end. But the act of taking small steps each day and trying will open your life up to all kinds of unexpected connections and possibilities. You are in the game and you know it. You're open for business. Your strength is action. All over the world, people who were abused or neglected in childhood are procrastinating, and they're thinking that they're the only one freezing up, getting stuck, struggling to get work done. It's all so common for people with childhood PTSD. And as long as you look at it as just laziness or a character flaw, you might be making your procrastination worse. Understanding that trauma in the past may have caused nervous system changes that make you vulnerable and prone to go into what's called freeze mode might just be what sets you free. My letter today is from a man I'll call Jacob, and he writes, "Hi, Anna. As far back as I can remember, I've always had the sense that everyone else is better than me. I've got my fairy pencil. I'm going to circle things I want to come back to on a second reading, but let's go through and see what Jacob's got going on. He says, they're better at sports, better at school, better at making friends or having friends, just a general sense of always being not good enough. My childhood had one parent who was, and still is, explosive, self-centered, and wanted his children to be adults and not children. The other parent was a codependent also, just trying to survive. My older sister and I were set up to fail in most cases, or accused of being lazy, when in fact neither was the case. My family were the low-budget crew for the family business, and most things were hardly hired out. I can remember cutting the lot for our new home in the middle of July. The driveway is 1/4 mile long. We moved all the brush and chipped it. The hardwood was dragged off by hand and stacked. Most of that time, we were all being yelled at, particularly me, for being lazy, he says. All right. Walking on eggshells was the daily ritual at my house, and never knowing who was going to get the wrath or why. We lived in a very rural area, and there weren't any kids from school nearby, and we weren't offered to be put into any activities with local kids. At school, it was a small community. Most of the kids were pretty close-knit because of sports, church, neighbors, and so on. So I always felt outside of things. I spent the majority of my childhood alone, or at least disconnected from most everyone. This continued through high school, and my only way out was to join the military. Then I did make friends and learned I wasn't as dumb and useless as I thought. When I came home, I went to work in the family business, and all of my fire and go-getter personality seemed to be extinguished. There wasn't any effective guidance. I was just thrown to the wolves, and why can't you do as well as XYZ? Or XYZ is kicking our butt and took this deal or that. At this point, about 4 years had passed, and I had spent thousands on coaching, training, and so on, and just couldn't seem to make a go. I left the company, more or less, and moved 1,500 miles away, but continued to contract. Disliking it all, I decided to start my own business and continue part-time. However, after about 20 years, it was easier to earn money from the old business than to focus on my business. I've again spent thousands of dollars on coaching and more training and built systems and so on, and have monthly costs besides living bills. I know exactly what needs to be done, prospecting. I know I'm very skilled at it, very polished, and I need to do a great job when I fall into an opportunity. Most days I spend at my desk staring at my computer, not doing work, not building either business, and just watching as everything falls apart around me until some random deal falls in my lap 2 or 3 times a year and I survive. Nothing I've done up to now has helped me take the right actions. I'm blind to what is holding me back, and regardless of journaling, hypnosis, screaming, forcing, I do not do what is necessary. This pattern has been an ongoing challenge for my entire adult life. I gave up on ever having a family due to poor choices and mates. So far, I've given up on my financial security and freedom, even though I know that I have been, for lack of a better word, blessed with talents and opportunities and have knowingly squandered them. Whoa. I just cannot see what the barrier is or how to address it. Okay, Jacob, I got you. Let's talk about this. So what you described about your childhood, but your youth and your young adulthood, where you were basically getting verbally abused all the time by your dad, your mom didn't do anything, that's enough to do some nervous system damage to a kid. And it was chronic and it was ongoing. And that's where CPTSD comes from. Chronic, ongoing, intense stress from abuse or neglect. In the case of kids. There are other reasons people get CPTSD, and I think you might have picked those up too along the way. But one of the ways that trauma manifests in us is we go into freeze mode. So there's these trauma reactions. There's roughly 4 of them. You could make a longer list. But fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. So we've all met the type who was traumatized in the past and they're just very full of conflict. They get into fights. They're always suing people. That's fight. Flight is running away, just avoiding the whole thing. You came back. You're sitting at your desk. I think you might be in freeze mode. And that's a nervous system state. And there's very good news about this. The nervous system states are ones that you can work on and get some healing around. If it is freeze mode, I really encourage you to read more about it. This has to do with your central nervous system and your sympathetic nervous system, which gets all freaked out when everything's upsetting, and then it calms down with the parasympathetic response. So another word for living in freeze mode is underfunctioning. There are some people who overfunction as a trauma response. They just try to do everything. They'll work themselves to exhaustion. They get into perfectionism. And then there's underfunctioning. And underfunctioning is what you're talking about, where you sit at your desk, you're, intending to get a lot done. You really need to work to get money, but you just can't seem to do it. You're paralyzed at your desk. So it's underfunctioning. It's not uncommon. So first of all, what really hurt my heart is when you just said, I've given up on relationships and because of poor choices, which is what we do. That's another thing that can be healed. But that you've been blessed with talents and opportunities and have knowingly squandered them. Could we just consider that there's another thing going on, that you didn't knowingly squander them, that you actually tried your best. But because of trauma you went through, your nervous system gets stuck sometimes and can't kick into gear. And what you need is a workaround to assist your nervous system to sort of start up again, to get going, to start governing your body and your ability to pay attention and remember. And when you can do those things, you can get a lot more confidence about prospecting. Now, for anybody who's never done sales, prospecting is where you make phone calls or network or find people who are potential customers for you. And it's part of having a business. And what a lot of people do when they start a business is they don't want to deal with that part. And they even will say formally, I don't want to do it. You're accepting that it has to be done. But Jacob, could I just say that sometimes a partner or an employee to do your sales for you, your prospecting for you, could possibly be a great fit. Salespeople will sometimes work on commission, which is cool. So if they can sit there and do the prospecting part and you can do the follow through and deliver the service that you provide, I don't know exactly what you do, but not everybody's cut out to be the salesperson, and that's okay. A lot of people don't realize that going into business or being a contractor or a consultant, that about half your work roughly unless you're famous, which who is, it's going to be like trying to find customers. And a lot of people with trauma really trip up around this one because it takes so much confidence. You know, some people have kind of like a mask that they can wear, a false self, to go out there and go, hey, I can provide this really good service. It's high quality. It's good pricing. You can talk to me about it. Some people that comes naturally, but it doesn't come naturally to everybody. And so I really recommend that you do your research. You don't need any more coaches or anything expensive. There's this thing called YouTube. I started up my second business entirely learned from YouTube. I learned the whole thing from YouTube. You can learn a lot there. But learning how people do the communication and appear confident and have charisma, say the things that lead to a sale. I think half of the procrastination and lack of confidence around that has to do with being too frozen a lot of the time to have done adequate research to know how to do it. Now, I mean, everybody knows a little bit how to do it, but really how to do it. And when I coach a lot of people who are business people and who are entrepreneurs, or, you know, they're solopreneurs. And this is a big issue for almost everybody. And they want to avoid it. They want to minimize it. They want to believe they already know something. But I promise you, you can learn from YouTube, also from books. There's very good business books about how to do this. And they help me to realize, like, of course I can't do every job. And after a while in a business, you start to realize which job are you. A book that was world-changing for me is called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. I loved that book. And what it helped me understand is that in starting up any business, you wear all the hats, and gradually you don't wear all the hats. That the only way you're ever going to be able to grow the business is to be able to start bringing in other people to wear some of the other hats. And so I'm guessing because of your coaching, you do know all of this. But I think a lot of coaching, it's not really well targeted for people who have complex PTSD. You got what you got from the coaching, so good. You know, that knowledge is in there. Right now, it's time to get out of freeze mode. The number one thing that is recommended for people in freeze mode is to go outside and move around. And so what's interesting is that one of your traumatic experiences was having to clear this like half-mile drive of brush and trees in July heat, which sounds like torture. It does sound like torture. And so I don't know what you do right now, but going outside and doing something that gives you joy, hopefully getting some nature, getting a little sunlight, and moving your body is how you can get out of freeze mode. A lot of us benefit from having a morning routine. And the morning routine is something that I teach in my dysregulation boot camp. You can find a link to that down below in the description section. So freeze mode is one aspect of nervous system dysregulation. It's one aspect. Now, all of us are capable of going into multiple trauma responses. Sometimes we fight, sometimes we freeze, we fawn, we're like, please like me, or we run away. But we often have a dominant one. So this is the one hurting you. Everybody can benefit from learning to re-regulate their nervous system. And so what I encourage you to do is learn about dysregulation, learn about it, start working on very simple things that you can do. They don't cost any money. You can wash your hands in very cold water. You can walk around outside. You can bang your feet left, right. You can press your tongue to the roof of your mouth. These are easy tips to just start bringing yourself into regulation. You can take 5 deep breaths or use box breathing where you breathe in for a certain measure, hold for a certain measure, exhale for a measure, hold for a measure, breathe in. All of these things can start bringing your nervous system back online. For some people, it is group activities. Now, somehow I get the feeling that you're very isolated in your work. So I really am going to encourage you to find a way to connect with other people, whether it's to go to an adult children of alcoholics and other dysfunctional families 12-step meeting, good way to make friends, or another 12-step meeting, or in some way connect with community, especially with men, especially with business people, people who get it, people who are working these same challenges. It's a completely different game sitting at your desk, thinking in your head about what you're going to do versus connecting with other people and sharing with them what you're going to do. The window opens, the oxygen comes in, good things can begin to happen. There needs to be nervous system alignment and a sense of positive connection to goals that you would like to have in your life. So having a business and having it be successful is a great joy, not to mention the financial benefits that help make life so much easier. So Jacob, I hope you'll do those things. And if you need help, come on into my dysregulation boot camp. It's easy. It's fun. If you like it, you can become a member at Crappy Childhood Fairy. And there you'll find a lot of people who are also working to heal their dysregulation and friends who are working through their freeze mode too. If you had trauma in the past, you probably struggle sometimes to get things done, to stick with things that you begin. So why is that? Even when you're actively healing PTSD from childhood, there are trauma patterns that can come out of nowhere, that can make you fragile at times. One day you feel like you're good, you're full of energy and ambition, and you're focused, you're working hard. And then the next day you're like, hey, why don't I step up a little here? And you take on something new, or you put yourself out there in a new way, and then, bam, you crash. It's a thing trauma survivors do, like a cycle or a wave pattern, Have you had that? Where you go up, you're doing good, you keep busy, and then you withdraw. It's not depression that I'm talking about here. It's more like going into a shell. Is it bad? It can be very bad. It can ruin your chances of success in life. People don't really talk about this, but I've seen it over and over again. I suffered with it myself. And yes, there is a way to heal it. So here's what crashing looks like. First, complex PTSD involves neurological dysregulation that can activate when you're under stress, or sometimes for no reason at all. When you're dysregulated, it can be hard to focus, you get spaced out, you can't really feel how much time is passing, and you feel really sensitive sometimes, or even overreactive to negative things like criticism or feeling left out. So these subtle ups and downs of neurological functioning, and there are so many of them, in your life throughout the day, it means that working 8 hours straight on a regular schedule is like forcing a square peg into a round hole. I've noticed that people with past trauma, more than most people, work in irregular bursts, sprints, and then quiet times. When you're on a roll, you can focus for a period of time. It might be hours, it might be days if you're lucky, could be even longer than that. Oh, that's a happy state, right? So let's call that humming along. And then, usually following a big step that you take because you have some confidence, because you've been humming along, you crash. And crashes don't always look like anything, but they are very much something. It's a terrible countervailing force that comes to pull you back down when you start getting a little too free, a little too real, a little too open, and that fragile side of you reaches in and tries to just pull you back where it thinks you're safe down here. So the motivation is safety to pull you back down. You know, something in you is trying to keep you safe, but the outcome is self-sabotage. So you get a promotion, you feel guilty. Or you lose some weight, you gain it back. And you get a little money, you waste it. CPTSD feels uncomfortable when you ascend to a new level. Now, crashes aren't always devastating or life-destroying. It's usually more like a period of sleepiness or vagueness or sometimes resentment or resistance. You know, you have your reasons, like, I really don't want to be productive right now. That's what it feels like in the moment. It doesn't look like any big thing necessarily. You might stop going to work, but usually you keep going to work. And you keep going to the things that you go to, but you're totally hiding. If you're not trying to do anything big in your life, you can hide that pretty well. But if you're trying to do something big and you're crashing, you might keep showing up for work, but things, you know, it might not be dramatic. It's just that things don't go anywhere. You know, you take on a project and it goes on longer than you thought. It's not really getting off the ground. Everyone knows what that's like. The project gets no liftoff. You make a start, but you can't get it done. Or you never start. It's just talking about it. I know that one. And because it's cyclical, eventually you'll have the urge to try something again, maybe months or years later when things have been going well for you and you've got a little momentum, you know, and then you put yourself out there and bam, the crash cycle begins again. So There are hard crashes and there are subtle crashes, which can be just as destructive to anything real and true and important you're trying to create in your life. For me, it was back when I wrote my first book, when I made my first film also. I did really well for a first-timer in both of those areas, and I was encouraged for real to keep pursuing both of those things, film and writing, but it was hard work, and it involved a lot of putting myself out there and even getting some criticism and feeling exposed to the public. And I remember after the film was done, a woman friend who had participated at a couple of the shoots as an extra was talking to me, and it was this great little film. Everybody in it and their families came to the screening. We had a party. The film won an award, and I was over the moon with my accomplishment. You know, I did it all in my spare time while I held down a full-time day job as an admin assistant at a hospital. And this woman friend who had some issues of her own, just out of the blue, said something like, "You think everybody had a fun time, but actually it was really awful for everyone because you were awful." And she said I was a bitch. And I started crying, and I really took it in, like I believed her. And I remember I was sitting on the floor next to the coffee table in her living room, and she said, "Yeah, you know, it wasn't just me, it was everyone who felt this way." And it was like, you know, it was like a knife in my heart. And I felt ashamed. And that night, I called everybody who had been in the film, and I asked them, you know, was I really bad? And they all said, no, that was really fun. You were fine. We loved it. That was great. Let's do it again. But what did I do? I gave up. I crashed. I learned so much from making my first film, and instead of taking all that learning and fun and making another one, I turned against myself. I kept just being an admin assistant, and instead of writing scripts and setting up shoots with my friends, I just fell back into watching TV at night, like for years. And this happened with my book too. The book did well, and I started getting all these invitations to speak and be on radio shows and to write columns. But I had a boss at the time, in my day job, who said that the head of the whole organization had said that my writing was a conflict of interest, and that if I wrote any more, I'd be fired. Well, my boss said, you know, that if it were up to him, of course, I could write. But, you know, the boss's boss wasn't okay with it. I did stop writing, but 2 years later, I was at a conference with the president of the big national organization who had supposedly said this, that I couldn't do it anymore. And I asked her, and I said, you know, now that we're kind of friends, I just want to ask about something that happened a couple years ago. You know, I wrote a book, it was doing really well, and you said I had to stop writing or I'd get fired. And she was just like, what? I never said that. I would never say that. We want people who are, you know, ambitious like that. We loved your book. We thought it was great. We bought it. We loved it. I could hardly even compute it for a minute. I was like, what? So I was like, okay, thank you. But what I had to face is that the boss that I had been working with for years sabotaged me, that he, you know, shut me down out of, who knows, we can speculate if he was jealous or, I don't know. I can't really see a scenario where he was sincerely worried that I wouldn't do my job. I did a great job on that job. So I was faced with the horrible reality that somebody I trusted would do that to me. And so what did I do? Did I go back to him and say, hey, you told me your boss said I couldn't publish again or I'd get fired, but that's not true. Like, I know her really well now, and she didn't do that. So why did you threaten my livelihood like that? Why did you make me stop doing this great thing that was making me successful? Well, that's not what I said. I said nothing. I never said anything. I crashed. So I kept working for him for years. And because I participated in his sabotage of me, I didn't write again for 18 years until I started the Crappy Childhood Fairy blog. In all, I worked under that guy for 10 years. And I wish I had just cut it short as soon as I recognized that that kind of level of sabotage was going on. It was such a dead end for me. But because I took it on inside and got, you know, frozen and melted down. And then I was having kids and all these things happened that I didn't carry on. So technically I could have written, but sometimes the greatness in you is held back by a fear that seems small, but is so significant that you could go your whole life never becoming your real self or doing the really good thing that you're capable of doing. So until I started Crappy Childhood Fairy, I didn't write. And now I write and write and write, and I do it every week. I do it every day. So 6+ years ago, I wrote my first blog post for Crappy Childhood Fairy, and I was very rusty at first. I had a really hard time getting anything on paper. I did a blog post, I don't know, at first maybe every month or something. Sometimes I'd go 3 months. It was really hard to do, and I was doing it on the side on top of the job I already had. And what happened was that movement, like beginning, you just start writing, and then you get momentum, like something is liberated in you because now you're freer. And I'm freer because every year that goes by in my life, I've used my daily practice more and more to really unearth the real me out of all the fearful and resentful thoughts that have been just suppressing me and thinking I had to go along with somebody who would tell me I can't write or I'd lose my job, right? So I'm following my calling. And if you're going to do that, and I recommend you seek that out, because this is where happiness is, where you really get to do what you're best at, what you're made to do, but you get stuck from doing it when you feel suppressed by your life circumstances, by the fear and resentment that you've got. And how that will manifest is that you try, but you cannot sustain it. That's what a crash is. It's the unsustainability of you following your natural path. So you're making it sustainable. And until you can do that, when you're suppressed like that through outer things and inner things, when you can't get yourself, just out there to do what you were made to do, you will feel frustrated. There will be a low-level depression every time you think about it. You'll be confronted sometimes with the indignity and the sort of insult of people being hard on you about doing things that were not really what you were meant to be doing anyway. And you took the job, so it's their right to expect you to do the job, right? But you took the wrong job. You followed the wrong path because you were so accustomed to crashing. You thought that you could not dare to follow the path you wanted. So it's all about get back on your path. Get back on your path and make it sustainable for yourself. So how do you do that? Here it is. I learned to modulate my crashes. That means make them not like this, but like this. Not so intense. If you're a person who crashes, if you fall off your game from time to time to the degree that it's really taking away from the quality of your life and your sense of freedom and confidence to pursue what you really want to be doing, I want to tell you how to modulate your crashes. Crashing follows a very similar pattern to a lot of other things that go with CPTSD. Notice that crashing looks a lot like neurological dysregulation. It gets triggered by something. You don't notice it at first necessarily. It distorts your perception, making you really vulnerable to discouragement and criticism. It comes with a physical state. Sometimes it's like physical agitation or a bit of a torpor. You just can't get your energy going. There is often a full self-attack involved. And self-attack doesn't help, right? It can feel like the crashing experience is something someone is doing to you, like so-and-so really upset me and now I can't focus. But notice that even when another person goes along with you on this, maybe apologizes for upsetting you, it doesn't solve the problem. They can't fix it because the crash has already been set in motion, so it's inside. That's because it's about the brain state that you're now slogging around in. And this is a lot like dysregulation. If you're on this channel much, I talk about neurological dysregulation. It's a common, little glitch that your nervous system can go into. It goes with childhood trauma. Everybody, in fact, gets dysregulated sometimes. Most people, virtually all people, can eventually re-regulate. But when you had trauma, it can be harder to come back. You go down farther, you stay there longer, it's harder to come back. So when that crash gets activated, it colors everything you see. It makes you think your efforts they're all a waste. Your talent is absolutely worthless. Nobody cares or wants to read your stupid book or watch your idiotic movie or eat the horrible dinner you made or be your boyfriend or whatever terrible thought fills your mind in there when you put yourself out there and get met with discouragement. It is so important when you realize you're in a brain state, that it's a normal reaction to stress or discouragement, which are always part of life, and therefore you can stop beating yourself up. beating yourself up only makes it worse, right? When you notice you're crashing, just treat it like a brain state and get to work supporting your brain. It's like, you were trying to get things done. Oops, crash. Let's get to work on my brain, change paths, build myself back up so that I can get back to work. So here's how you do that. You can develop routines. Our brains like routines and they find them relaxing, especially when trauma has made things kind of chaotic. And it's hard sometimes to stick with routines, but you're going to need to keep accepting that and embracing your efforts anyway. And it can take time to get consistent. You want consistency because any kind of emotional drama or a crazy schedule, it drains your energy and it's putting you at risk for a crash. So do you go long spells without eating? Well, I never do, but I know some people do. You want to stay consistently nourished. Do you stay up all night and then sleep all day? That's going to set you up for a crash, that irregular sleep schedule. If you tend to lose your temper, if you're emotionally dysregulated, if you're a people pleaser, if you end up in quick relationships with people you don't know, all of those things can mess up the gentle routine your brain loves, and it sets you up for a crash. Now, you don't have to be boring or live like a perfect little princess. That's my worst fear. It's good to live your life and do new things sometimes, but you want to overall keep things within parameters that don't drain everything out of you. When you're emotionally or physically exhausted, your mind plays tricks on you and self-sabotages right when things are hard, right when a new job brings a challenge in front of you. If your well is full, you can get through the challenge. If you're already drained from a bunch of crazy stuff happening in your life, you're going to want to find an excuse to withdraw. And you will. You call in sick, fall into resentment. You believe that you're helpless, hopeless. You lash out at society. You give up and disappear. So you don't want big swings here. No big swings. Just walk in the path. Remember, because you have CPTSD, and in a way it's like having diabetes, where, yes, you have it, but if you take care of it and follow a way of life that supports you, you can keep it under control and maybe even reverse it. So CPTSD is like that. And this model also, it's similar to crashing. Diabetics take insulin. And in the same way, you might need to do things that keep you balanced and resilient and able to handle hard things, risks, criticisms, little embarrassments, periods of intense effort that wear you down. You keep yourself balanced with decent sleep, decent diet, support from friends. Don't skimp on that one. Hardly anything works when you try to do it in isolation. You can learn to calm the triggers that tend to set off the crash by becoming aware and learning to discharge the fearful and resentful emotions and thoughts that cloud your thinking when you're crashing.